This is Andrew Thorp King, author of Failure Rules, and you are listening to the Brutally Delicious Podcast.
1, 2, 3, 4. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast. The Brutally Delicious Podcast.
Yourself?
I'm doing great. Thanks for joining me.
You got it. No problem. Thanks for having me.
Finally, I think we've been trying to get this to work out for a little bit of time, right?
Yeah. It's been a couple months or something like that. Going back and forth with Austin. Yeah.
You doing all right?
I'm doing good, man. How about yourself?
Oh, yeah. Where are you located?
Philly area.
Oh, okay. So not too far. I'm in Richmond.
Okay, nice. Good.
Yeah. Nice. I like Philly, actually. Every time I've been there, it's been a blast.
Yeah. It's a great place, although a little less great in recent years. So
Yeah, but the food is pretty awesome in that city as well.
Yeah.
So.
That's true. I lived in the city for a while and then left in the pandemic and moved to the burbs, and very happy about it. It's been a good move. Still going to the city, but living in the burbs now.
A little bit safer.
Yeah.
So we can just jump right in and talk about your book here.
Sure.
Where did the idea or the impetus come from for Failure Rules?
Yeah, so it was around the tail end of 2013. I was taking a beach walk at Brigantine, New Jersey, kind of a contemplative beach walk on Father's Day. I was with my ex-wife at the time and was walking through like twin failure at the time, right? So I just exited my position as a partner in an online lending company. So it was like a business divorce with the next business partner.
Mm-hmm.
So that required some thinking around reorganizing my financial life and my pursuits. Also, I knew I was on the precipice of a marital divorce. I was with my wife at the time, but things were not heading in the right direction.
Right.
And I was thinking about just life in general, hard times in general. I was listening to the song Hard Times by the Cro-Mags as I was thinking through all this and on a playlist. And, John Joseph from the Cro-Mags wrote the foreword to the book. And, I was just reflecting on my 20s and my 30s and everything that I had gone through as an entrepreneur, as a creative, and how I encountered certain difficulties, failures, tricky situations, and what I had learned from them. And also kind of the underpinning philosophies that have really helped me get through them and see them with a different lens, all the different virtual mentors and inputs that really buoyed me during those times. And then the quote from Winston Churchill, success is going from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm, really kind of stuck in my mind. And that was the one thing that was kind of my constant was no matter what was going on, whether it was like, navigating the worlds of finance and banking in different variations that I'd done over time, or owning a gym, or owning 2 record labels, or being a bodybuilder, competing there, and writing a spy novel, all these things there's always an enthusiasm thread. One thing ended, one thing collapsed, and there was already always an enthusiasm thread to keep me going on something new, some sort of adjacent possible. And so that quote really stuck in my mind, and I got convicted to write a book on the value of failure. And I started out that journey, wrote some loose notes that day, various iterations over 7 years, then working with Scribe Media to get the production going and all the editing, and it finally became what it is today.
So it was a 7-year process, huh?
Yeah. I would say, 7 years at least, right? For just writing it, getting it to a draft that I felt comfortable presenting to editors. And then another year and a half on going back and forth with the editors, just refining it. Right. So probably a little more than 7 years at that point.
So I have two questions for you from what you brought up. First, was it difficult putting all of your personal stories and all of, I guess, dirty laundry into the book? Did you feel too vulnerable?
A little bit. Yeah, but I pushed through it because I really knew that the books that inspired me were the ones that fucking did that.
Right.
James Altucher's Choose Yourself, the shit that guy wrote about his ups and downs as an entrepreneur, losing it all, gaining it all, stuff with his divorce, all these things. That was one of the books that inspired me. Same with Srinivas Rao, who's now kind of become a coach for me, who wrote The Art of Being Unmistakable. And those books inspired me to write this book, so I had to take the same approach. Writing about sensitive topics like having to declare personal bankruptcy, to keep going and really allow my record labels to long-term be sustainable. The divorce stuff, everything from being investigated by the feds to panic attacks to
Right.
abandoning my home to the most sensible going on food stamps, but leveraging other people's stories, like on the food stamps one, leveraging Roger Moret's story from Agnostic Front growing up on food stamps, his view of it, of making sure it's a hand up and not a handout, because Agnostic Front famously also wrote a song eviscerating people that abuse the welfare system,
Right.
even though Roger himself grew up on welfare. So there's some serious nuance there, right? And then also Stephanie Land of the show The Maid on Netflix. She wrote the book The Maid. Her story of being a single mom, house cleaner on food stamps, and the grit of her working through that. And so, like, leveraging other people's stories really helped give context to my own personal stories, I think, and allowed me to feel more confident and connecting the dots to my stories as I laid them on the
Was
page.
there stuff that you wrote originally and axed out? You're like, shit, I can't put that in there?
Well, the food stamps ones was the hardest for me, man. There was like this working class pride in me that just didn't want to admit that I ever needed help like that,
Right.
particularly from government, because it would be the last place that I would want it. But I got in a position where that was necessary and gaps couldn't be filled otherwise. And I was working my ass off, and it just wasn't enough. And had 3 young children, and that I had to do it. So that was very difficult for me from a pride standpoint, but had to get over that and really spell out my the lessons I learned from it.
Gotcha. So the other question I had that came up right off the bat was the book, I think, is super timely, right? Because everybody has been so beaten down over the last couple of years, and everybody is so fucked up, myself included. Just sometimes just trying to keep one foot in front of the other. And the book kind of helps you, at least from my point of view, like keep one foot in front of the other or rethink, reframe things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So just, if you don't mind me asking, like for you, was there anything in the book in particular that was a pivot moment for you in terms of how you're thinking about things?
I think, and the quote I wrote in my notes here, and it's probably in your bio too, but the quote I wrote, sorry, I can't fucking talk. Embrace the F word and let the hard times make you stronger, because after it sucks. I think that is like great.
Yeah, after it sucks, failure rules. That's right. I mean, that's the thing, right? Like, just for your readers and your viewers here, I'll hold the book up. It's Failure Rules: The 5 Rules of Failure for Entrepreneurs, Creatives, and Authentics. You can find it anywhere books are consumed online. Go check it out. Go buy it. Give it a read. Download the audiobook, whatever yanks you crank. But yeah, so I mean, that's the tagline is after it sucks, failure rules, because there's no denying that it sucks, right? Like, this isn't some sort of like sugarcoating, self-helpy,
no, because I think it's like, down and dirty, and you're in the trenches, and I think as a reader you pick that up and you can relate to it.
Yeah.
Right. I think what you just said is right. It's not glossy and nice. It's really down and dirty at times.
Yeah.
But I think you can relate to it because, like I said, we've all been sort of beaten down and fucked up over the last few years.
Yeah. And that's the message of the book, man. Like, in the rubble, you can find the jewels in the rubble, but you have to fucking dig. It's going to be painful. You have to sit in some discomfort. You have to learn to energize chaos, right? So instead of letting the chaos just hit you and knock you down, see it as an energy that you can step outside of it, be objective, push aside your emotional participation and steer that energy to reshape your life in a new way. And that's failure rule number 1, is failure purifies. It's taking a look at your failure event and saying, okay, I am not this event. This is happening to me, even though I wish I avoided it or it was avoidable. It's here. How can I look at this and see how it can burn off, extinguish things within me that needed to be burned off, old thinking, old ways of being, old habits, old faulty foundations, and how can I rebuild and reshape and expand myself and do a new iteration of myself? That takes a lot of work. It takes intentionality. It takes a premeditative thought process. But that is the idea, and I go through tons of examples in the book of people who their moment of failure purification became kind of the crucible that really made them who they were in a unique way on their calling journey that otherwise they might not have been.
Right.
And it's those type of stories. I mean, Johnny Cash is a perfect example, just off the top of my head. I mean, he was on this kind of forced track to be a salesman for his ex-father-in-law, decided to listen to his internal spirit voice, rebel against that, go after music. But in that journey, it was chaos, right? Like he couldn't maintain a marriage because of the lifestyle. He couldn't handle fame, so he succumbed to drug addiction. There's all kinds of tragedy, this and that. But then in Act 2, when he kind of got over the curve and found redemption in that, it gave so much more texture and depth and beauty and truth to his music.
Oh, yeah, because it's real and authentic.
Yeah, it was like the purification of his failures ended up being his greatest strength in the end.
Right.
And it informed his art in such a perennial way.
So what do you say, and I know you're not I don't believe you're a psychologist anyway, but what do you say to people that are continuously beat down and they don't see the end to that failure, that cycle? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it sure does. Well, I can understand that. I mean, there's times where you're in the abyss where it's hard to see that any pinprick of light might ever shine through that you can grab onto and find some micro momentum. So it's very, very difficult. But I've always found personally, and I think there's a lot of data to suggest that action is always a cure. Action, precipitates reinvention, and wallowing in your feelings, overvaluing your feelings over action doesn't work. It's the old saying that's pretty popularized right now that mood follows action. That you have to find a way to come up with a reasonable plan of experimentation out of your abyss. And you need to start taking action on things. And many of them might fail, but you have to have a waterfall. If this, then that. If not this, then what? And you have to have this scaffolding of ideas and go after it. So perfect example, when I got divorced my first time, and when I was going through this business divorce at the same time, all of a sudden, after being long married and being an entrepreneur, I found myself with no home to live in and no office to go to by day. I was living out of a hotel room. Right. I could have drowned in alcoholism or something of that effect. I didn't. I still love alcohol. I drink much bourbon. But instead, I had this idea engine kind of already waiting in the ready because that was my mentality. And out of that emptiness, that failure space, the purification of that, there was 5 new strands of reinvention that occurred. I ended up taking because prior I had been partnering in online lending businesses. I ended up doing consulting in that space and got some good gigs. One of those gigs led to a proper formation of a lead generation company that was lucrative. At the same time, I rejuvenated my record labels, was putting out records by bands like Booze and Glory and the Coffin Cats and the Creep Show. And at the same time, I finished my first spy novel. And then I also began writing Failure Rules. And then I also found my way into the corporate world as a commercial banker in the fintech space, payment space, which to me at the time was akin to going from the online lending space, which was, very kind of alt lending, almost subterranean, payday loan moniker kind of thing.
Right.
Going from that to corporate banking, was like going from a porn star to a regular actor. So that was a big deal. I'm still in that career now, almost 10 years in and flourishing. So 5 things were born out of that failure space. So instead of just lamenting it, and, woe is me, I'm not married anymore, and this other business partnership didn't work out. You have to look at what's left and what can you piece together, and don't just have one plan, have multiple, and institute them in parallel.
Okay. So I'm reminded as you're talking of that movie with Bill Murray, What About Bob, right? So momentum, you're saying, in baby steps, right? Yeah. I mean, if you're moving, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it's moving, man. It's about moving, man. I mean, baby steps or not, but it's also multiple steps. It's also, again, portfolio pursuits. Nothing is safe. That's failure rule number 2. So because nothing is safe, have a portfolio pursuits mentality. Have kind of prioritized a list of ambitions and try to institute them in parallel, or at least have 1 or 2 waiting in the ready on standby should your first, 1 or 2 not work out the way you want or not pace the way you expect.
Right. Are you surprised about how you ended up or where you ended up with this book? I mean, you couldn't have imagined all of that stuff that happens would launch something like this, right?
No, that's the other beauty. Look at that, right? If these things didn't happen, I wouldn't have the opportunity to talk about, I think, very meaningful and deep concepts and experiences, both my own and those that I study in the book. if that stuff didn't happen. I don't think I would have been able to utilize those introspective talents, my writing talents, in the same way without going through those fires, right? So it's absolutely, turning chicken shit into chicken salad.
I'm also thinking as I'm talking to you that this has got to be leading to TED Talks, public speaking. There must be some stuff on the horizon, right?
That's where it's going. I haven't really invoked all that yet, but because I haven't put too much effort into that, I'm just working on a podcast tour now. So just trying to do as much media as possible, 2 or 3 a week.
Right.
Keep that going until it's exhausted. I'm going to start my own podcast when that's exhausted. But in the interim, I am looking at going after some speaking events. And so that'll start happening soon. I'm doing some events type things in the cigar world because there's some crossover there. Lots of entrepreneurs in that space and smoking cigar on the cover. I have endorsements from cigar personalities on the book and stuff like that. And then end up doing some crossover stuff with music. I'm thinking about doing and talk to a few people behind the scenes I can't mention, but maybe doing some sort of like spoken word tour.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It leans itself or lends itself that way.
Yeah, I haven't organized it yet, but I've had a few conversations with some authors in the music space, and so we'll see if we can get that going at some point. But that another cool thing that happened recently is Newman University ended up choosing the book to be required reading as part of one of their entrepreneur minor courses.
Oh, wow.
Fall. Yeah, so now it's going to be on the syllabus, required reading, and they're going to have me come in and speak, and it's part of the curriculum, and so that's pretty badass.
That's great.
Forced to read, case studies of Lemmy from Motorhead.
So along those same lines, then, do you feel a sort of responsibility now because it's taken on a life of its own?
Yeah, I feel responsibility to honor the work, right? So I did all the work in writing it. And so the harder part is building an audience and evangelizing it out in the world. That takes more of a long tail. And for me, it's harder, more long tail, and money is being invested in all of that. So I'm looking at it like a multi-year plan. I have it all mapped out. Again, if this, then that, and kind of backup plans to pivot to if one methodology doesn't work. And so I'm invoking that. You know, it's 6 months in, had over 40 appearances, either already recorded or scheduled.
Right.
And I'm working with a campaign manager for my Amazon ads, working on speaking ideas. I have a merchandise company that I started, Soul and Fire Supply Company, that echoes the themes of the book. There's a special cigar line for it. I got the soundtrack to the book, the playlists. There's all these tentacles, and eventually I'll do the podcast. So it's like, how can I take this message and repurpose the message in as many formats as possible over time?
Right.
To both promote the book and just promote the message in and of itself, because the book is nothing but a medium for the message. So however the message gets out there, it doesn't matter to me. Sure, I'd like to find ways to monetize it, and that's part of the plan, but it's really mostly I wouldn't even say a labor of love. It's a calling, really. It's a calling for me at this point. I feel like this gives me the highest meaning in my life, especially when I have people that are, write me and are affected by the book or can relate to it, or here's something I said and it changed their thinking on something.
And that's funny you brought that up, because that's my next question. I'm sure you've had people respond to you and say, hey, this changed my thought process, or made me have baby steps, or take baby steps one in front of the other and do something. How does that make you feel in the end? And can you share any of those stories?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of anything specific. So recently I posted something on Instagram, and I don't even remember exactly what I posted, but I do these like hot tub updates on Instagram where I'm hanging out in my hot tub, smoking a cigar, and I'm just thinking about some issue or some concept, and I say something. And I don't remember specifically what I said, but whatever it was, it gave this person clarity on leaning into accepting reduced hours at work and going after starting their own screen printing business because of that event, that somewhat failure event. So that was just one off the top of my head, and then there's been many like that.
So as the creator and the writer, that's got to make you feel, I don't want to say validated, because I don't know if that's even necessary to be validated, but it's got to make you feel pretty good, right? Yeah, well, it makes me feel like, all right, this is the purpose in it, right? Like, it's not to sell 1 million books, so that'd be great. It's to sustainably be able to have avenues to purvey the message and to get the message out to the world and have people resonate with it. I mean, that's really the purpose,
right? I still hold a day job. My money comes from elsewhere. This is generating some money to go against the cost, but not nearly enough, and that's okay. I expected that. This is really about, like, in some ways, it's about present purpose and future legacy.
Nice. And for those not familiar with the failure rules, I mean, you draw from a bunch of different stories or a bunch of different artists and characters that people can identify with. And I'm just looking at the list here. Everybody from Henry Rollins to Toby Keith, even J.K. Rowling, right?
Yeah.
So the people find something to identify with. How did you find all those stories? I mean, was it just a ton of research, or?
A little bit of research, but most of it was very intuitive, right? Like, most of these stories I'd already encountered are actually ones that already, like, kind of changed me or shaped me or stuck in my head and literally helped me out through hard times, or people whose stories really inspired me, right? So there were a cast of virtual mentors. I mean, everybody from the late spy novelist Vince Penn to Lemmy from Motorhead. You mentioned J.K. Rowling. Entrepreneur podcaster James Altucher, ex-gang leader Elgin James, who started FSU in Boston, who now is a screenwriter and mentee of Robert Redford, and wrote the script for Mayans MC, spin-off to Sons of Anarchy, to Captain Tony Terracino, who was the mayor of Key West, Florida, before he passed away and was a bit of a renegade, to Thomas Smallwood, the professional bowler, like a real wide variety of people. I mean, obviously, there's a music thread throughout the whole thing, right?
Right.
I'm quoting Scott Vogel from Terror, Hatebreed, the song "Divinity of Purpose." That song, that in and of itself was a big influence on me. And you mentioned Rollins, and there's all kinds of music throughout. But I draw from all kinds of entertainment, philosophy, religion, everything. I mean, quoting everything from, again, Aristotle to Lemmy, so.
Right. That was my point. So yeah, it's a little bit of everything in there, and people can identify, it's not just punk, or it's not just metal, and it's not just political figures. It's everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And, not just entertainment stuff, like true business minds, true, whether I'm quoting, Tim Ferriss or, whoever else, so it's definitely a business psychology book, but it's deeper than that. Mixes in a lot of spirituality, mixes in a lot of philosophy, and a lot of art and creativity.
Right, and I think they all go hand in hand for sure. I know this is probably too early, but are you already looking for a sequel?
Well, next thing I do, I want to make sure whatever I do next is built on the back of a proper audience that's been built. So that's where I'm at now. So if that takes 2 years, 3 years, wherever I feel like, all right, because the book's selling consistently with an upward trajectory, right? Mm-hmm. So building an audience. When I get to the point where I feel like that is kind of built, then I'll drop another product and it'll be something in the universe, right? So, it might be just taking a concept from this book and isolating and writing a whole book on that concept, pulling one from one concept. But something still the Failure Rules universe, just to keep the brand going and give it more technical life. Yeah.
It's hard to keep people's attention spans these days. Everybody's got like the 30-second attention span. So the fact that it's, progressing and growing is great, because people lose interest so quick.
Yes, they do. I know. It's the downside to the immediacy of disintermediation and being able to get things out there to the world.
Yep.
So can everybody else. A lot of noise to cut through.
Right. I mean, even in the music world, they listen to one song instead of a record, and maybe 30 seconds of that song, and already looking to flip to something else. And it's crazy. All that hard work that, the artist or the writer puts into it is kind of just so disregarded. It's a shame.
And I'm guilty of it too, but I mean, it's also the beauty of the multi-format world. Like, you can chop up a long-form podcast, do many different cuts, and post them on different socials, and at least try to get cuts out there where people can consume them without their attention span expiring.
Right.
And it's it's just part of what you got to do. You got to put it into different formats.
Yep, that's going to bring me to the end of my questions. Did I miss anything you want to cover?
I don't think anything specifically. I mean, again, just for your listeners and viewers, I'll hold the book up, Failure Rules, the 5 Rules of Failure for Entrepreneurs, Creatives, and Authentics. Lots of great kind of music references in there, music personalities, also a lot of other things, and go check it out.
Where can we find you online?
Yeah, you can find me at andrewthorpking.com. No E on the end of Thorpe. Follow me on Instagram at Andrew Thorp King. Same at YouTube at Andrew Thorp King. Yes.
Thank you, my friend. I'm glad we finally got it to work out. Sorry about everything that's been delayed, but
No worries.
life happens, I guess, right?
You got it. That's the rules.
All right, man. Take care, my friend. Good luck.
Have a great day.
All right, we'll see you. Bye.